Sup, you beautiful bastards. Hope you're having a fantastic Wednesday. Welcome back to the Philip DeFranco Show, and let's just jump into it. And the first thing we're going to talk about today, by far one of the most requested stories today, and that is the story around McKayla Maroney. The two-time Olympic medalist that we just talked about on Monday in connection to a different story came out today with her own hashtag #MeToo story. We've seen more and more women over the past few days using the hashtag #MeToo to share their stories of sexual harassment, sexual assault. And today, McKayla Maroney shared her story of sexual abuse. And she said this was at the hands of Larry Nassar, her former USA Women's Gymnastics and Olympics team doctor. Maroney writing, "People should know this is not just happening in Hollywood, this is happening everywhere. Wherever there is a position of power, there seems to be potential for abuse. I had a dream to go to the Olympics, and the things I had to endure to get there were unnecessary and disgusting. I was molested by Dr. Larry Nassar. Dr. Nassar told me that I was receiving medically necessary treatment that he had been performing on patients for over 30 years. It started when I was 13 years old at one of my first national team training camps in Texas, and it didn't end until I left the sport. It seemed whenever and wherever this man could find the chance, I was, quote, treated. It happened in London before my team and I won the gold medal, and it happened before I won my silver. For me, the scariest night of my life happened when I was 15 years old. I had flown all day and night with the team to get to Tokyo. He'd given me a sleeping pill for the flight, and the next thing I know, I was all alone with him in his hotel room getting a, quote, treatment. I thought I was going to die that night." Maroney then going on to say that she's not an expert, but here's what she thinks are the best next steps for everyone moving forward to prevent things like this in the future. I'll link to her full statement down below. And so here, let's talk about Larry Nassar. Now, if you're familiar with this controversy, you know about Larry Nassar, but just in case you don't, Nassar worked for USA Gymnastics for 29 years. He is currently being sued by over 100 women who claim that he sexually assaulted them. Nassar is also facing 22 counts of first-degree criminal sexual conduct. There, he faces a life sentence if convicted. He's also already pled guilty to child pornography charges. They found that included victims as young as 6 years old. This included 37,000 images and videos. They found a GoPro that contained Nassar allegedly molesting girls in a pool. As far as what the treatment was, what the other gymnasts called the procedure, just hearing it from U.S. Olympic gymnast Jamie Dancer, it will make you furious.
He did touch my breasts underneath my t-shirt. When he first did the procedure, we'll call it, I was either 13 or 14. He said that there is a procedure or a way to get my hips back in alignment when he would put his fingers into me vaginally. And I don't know how I wasn't uncomfortable, but just being a kid and being a little girl and being in such an intense environment, I was so miserable because I felt like I got in trouble every day for something else. I had no idea back then that he was doing something wrong.
And I want you to remember that the alleged victims, they were as young as 9 years old. He would gain the trust of these young girls. He would put his fingers inside of them and move their leg to act like he was making them feel better. And then you remember he was in this position for 29 years. Unchecked, nonstop, victims delivered right to his door. It's horrifying. And where I end up on this story is I just want to ask the question, can we just throw this Nassar guy in a fire? This is a monster that went unchecked for decades. And I know I always lose some of you when I talk about what I think we should do with kid touchers, with child molesters, but in my eyes, those aren't people. Those are just monsters. And so that's why, once again, I'll say if there was a list where you could sign up to curb stomp Nassar, I'm not only signing that paper, I'm cutting in line to make sure I'm up at the top. In my opinion, that kind of evil doesn't deserve the space that it's taken up. Hey, outside of my very strong feelings around this story and the facts that we've been given, I'd love to know your thoughts here. And not just how do you feel about this story, but how do you feel about this story compared to the story we're hearing about actresses? Same, different, obviously there's a big age difference here. I'd love to know your thoughts. But from that, I want to share some stuff I love today, and Today in Awesome, brought to you by DeFrancoElite.com. If you're a fan of the show, what we're doing now, what we want to build in the future, you can go support us over there. You get 20% coupon codes, early access to some of the videos, exclusive live streams. You get access to the Elite-only Discord. By joining, you help make the show a little safer. Actually, yesterday's show is a perfect example. We talked about Rocco, we got demonetized. In the past, that would have just meant that we essentially lost money for trying to put a video out. But now we don't have to worry about that, and we can actually still grow thanks to you beautiful bastards. And the first bit of awesome is if you are looking for a show to watch, I cannot recommend Mindhunter on Netflix more. It is fantastic, I love it, and I cannot wait for more seasons. Then for the foodies out there who have never heard about The Garbage Plate, sharing this video from Thrillist, I'm sharing what they're calling Rochester's best kept secret. Then we got the How It Should Have Ended for Spider-Man Homecoming. Wisecrack put out a video around the philosophy of Mr. Robot. We got a trailer for the new Louis C.K. movie, I Love You Daddy. There you got some Chloe Moretz, John Malkovich goodness. And if you want to see the full versions of everything I just shared, share the secret link of the day, anything at all. Links, as always, are in the description down below. And then, very quickly, I want to talk about some news around our industry. And this is an update around the Casey Neistat YouTube demonetization situation. If you don't know what I'm talking about there, to oversimplify, YouTube was called out by myself and many other creators in the community for demonetizing people like Casey, but not demonetizing people like Jimmy Kimmel and other late night hosts when talking about tragedy. Casey was demonetized for simply talking about wanting to raise money for the victims of a tragedy. Meanwhile, Jimmy Kimmel had ads playing all over his content where he was talking about the tragedy and guns. Many people felt like this was a double standard, that YouTubers by themselves, if they're not part of a corporation, they're just second-class citizens. YouTube came out saying that the ads on those videos were not sold by Google, they were sold by Jimmy Kimmel's team or the company that owns them. So essentially, even if they were profiting from those ads, it seemed like they were trying to kind of push the blame away. But they also added, quote, "In the specific case of tragedies like the one in Las Vegas, we are working to not allow such partners to sell against such content." So then it's quiet for a little bit, and then Casey puts out a video titled Demonetize, Demonetize, Demonetize. And he points out that his completely PC video of him conducting an interview got demonetized. And I feel like most people that watched that video went, you know what, I think Casey made some really valid points. He spoke about the situation in a way that doesn't come off as bitching, which is one of the reasons why so many of us try to not talk about it. Some people, rather than seeing it as a critique of a business, they see it as whining, and then you have the Gizmodos of the world being dismissive about it. But Casey talks about it in a way of, you need to do something about this, not only because we're your creators, but because we are what make you special. When you think of communities around video, you don't really think of Facebook, even though they're touting these obviously very bloated view numbers. You think of YouTube, and if you don't take care of those creators, or at the very least just have better communication with those people, they're going to jump to other places. And I think that's a smart way to talk about it for YouTube to care, because when you are a giant company, most likely you don't think with your heart, you think with your wallet. And so then I get confused when the BBC puts out a story with the headline, "YouTube star Casey Neistat attacks video sites leaders." What video did you watch? In the first part of the write-up, you even write, "YouTube has said it's listening. Quote, we watched Casey's video and appreciate him and the wider community voicing their concerns," end quote, a spokeswoman told the BBC. And so I think if there is a point that I can try and get across in this is, if people are sharing their stories, they're talking about this, please don't see this as other people whining. When you see smaller creators complaining about this, concerned about this, you have Sky Williams putting out a video saying, "I'm being demonetized, I don't know what to do." You have people concerned about their livelihood, the sustainability of this business that they've helped build on YouTube. And you have larger creators like myself and Casey Neistat that are speaking on this because we get attention. Unfortunately, a lot of YouTubers have been trained that the only time we get a response or reaction is when we say something publicly. We're sharing this concern because we are worried about the other creators on the site. We were worried about the longevity of the site in general. People like Casey and myself, we've insulated ourselves. Even if we only take into account big moves in the past year, Casey is insulated by his Beam deal. I'm insulated thanks to DeFranco Elite. And the note that I will end on is I do feel like YouTube is trying to be better. The AI for their algorithm is learning, but for most creators, it's not learning fast enough. For some of these creators, especially the smaller ones, it's like they're in a locked room. It's filling up with water. It's almost above their mouth. And you have someone saying, "Don't worry, we're figuring out how to get some air holes in here." That's great, but you shouldn't be shocked when people are saying, "Where are those fucking air holes?" Anytime now. That's where I'll end that one. Then let's talk about an update to a story that is most likely gonna make you go, "That took 6 months?" Remember Dr. Dow from that United Airlines flight? He was forcibly removed from his seat, banged up, bloodied. Well, according to a new report from Chicago's Inspector General Joseph Ferguson, 2 of the 4 law enforcement personnel that were involved have been fired. And as far as the other 2 involved, 1 resigned and the other received a 2-day suspension. Dow, you might remember, was on the receiving end of a broken nose, a concussion, he lost 2 teeth. And the report details that this happened due to excessive force. The investigation finding that the officers mishandled a non-threatening situation that resulted in a physically violent and forceful removal of Dr. Dow. Or I guess to paraphrase, this part of the investigation involved them watching the same video that millions of other people watched. Also, according to the investigation, the employees made misleading statements and deliberately removed material facts from their reports. Which of course brings us to, how did this take 6 months? We had the video and what they put in their reports 6 months ago. I mean, it's great that they're publicly acknowledging what the law enforcement personnel did here, but it feels so obvious. But hey, I guess better late than never? Then let's talk about President Trump in the news for a new controversy. Earlier this week, Donald Trump made comments about past presidents not calling the families of the fallen like he does, without fully once again going into how untrue that statement is, the backtracking, the reconfiguring of what I really meant was. Let's move past that part, we talked about it yesterday. But the main takeaway for today is that he said he had not reached out to the families yet. He had written letters that were going to be sent or had been sent, and he planned to call call, and now reportedly the president has now made those phone calls to the families. And the controversy today is around a phone call between President Trump and a widow, Maisha Johnson. Her husband is La David Johnson, who died 2 weeks ago in Niger. Reportedly, she was in a car traveling to meet her husband's remains when President Trump called. She reportedly spoke with him on speakerphone, surrounded by family and Florida Congresswoman Frederica Wilson. And when the Congresswoman was later asked about the phone call, she said this to reporters.
I was in the car when President Trump called. He never said the word hero. He said to the wife, well, I guess he knew what he was getting into.
She was then later asked by another reporter, are you sure that's what he said?
Are you sure you heard what he said, that the president said he knew what he was signing up for? You heard that?
Yeah, he said that.
Later, when talking to the Washington Post, she said that Trump made the widow cry, adding that she wanted to curse him out. Initially, in response to this, a White House official did not confirm or deny that this happened, but said, quote, the president's conversations with the families of American heroes who have made the ultimate sacrifice are private. But this morning, Trump took to Twitter to defend himself, tweeting, Democrat Congresswoman totally fabricated what I said to the wife of a soldier who died in action, and I have proof. Sad. And Congresswoman Wilson went on CNN and MSNBC this morning, and she said,
well, I don't know what kind of proof he could be talking about. I'm not the only person that was in the car. And I have proof too. Well, I didn't hear the whole phone call, but I did hear him say, I'm sure he knew what he was signing up for, and but it still hurts.
And I'm going to stop it right there because you may have noticed something. Congresswoman Wilson initially said one thing and now has slightly changed it. Just so you remember, she initially says,
well, I guess he knew what he was getting into.
And now she says,
I'm sure he knew what he was signing up for, and but it still hurts.
That's two different things. One is, I guess he knew what he was getting into. The other is, I'm sure he knew what he was signing up for, but it still hurts. It's one of the potentials of the job, but even going into it knowing that it doesn't make this hurt any less. That's a completely different statement. Now, you can argue if that statement is accurate or not. In the past decade, it's been reported that if you're in the Army, your risk of death is 0.1%, your risk of being injured in active duty, 1%. But also keep in mind, those numbers don't take into account job specialty, and I don't believe that there's really a true risk assessment for an individual. So as far as that, I don't think it's a fair, accurate statement to say that everyone going into the military thinks that they're going to die. Statistically, in the past decade, it's actually rare. You can even argue that it's not the time or place to say something like that. You just say, thank you so much for his service. America is greater because of men like David, and I'm so sorry for your loss. Right, something more along the lines of that. But that said, Wilson herself even says she didn't hear the entire conversation. But that said, the Washington Post reported that the mother of Sergeant Johnson confirmed Wilson's claims. Kawanda Jones Johnson saying she was in the car during the call and, quote, President Trump did disrespect my son and my daughter and also me and my husband. She then declined to elaborate, but when asked if Wilson's account of what happened was accurate, she said yes. But ultimately where I end up on this story is I hate that we're even having to talk about this. This family's already in pain. Now they're being thrust into the national spotlight. It feels like everyone's screaming and claiming stuff. You got Wilson being asked, do you think that you're politicizing this? She says, no, I was asked a question, I gave an answer. And for me, that seems like a little BS. You gave the answer, but you excluded initially the first part where he says, but it doesn't hurt any less. And you could also say Trump's politicizing this, and other people saying, well, no, he was just answering a question from that Rose Garden press conference. You could also argue, yes, he did, because there was no reason to reference past presidents, what they did and what he's doing and how he does more. Once again, I'm not saying that's a fact, I'm just saying that's Trump's claim. And now he's referencing that he has proof, but then the White House officials saying they don't comment on these private conversations. So is he just referencing proof and not going to show it? But at the same time, you have Johnson's mother confirming Wilson's account. But Trump has also dug in further, telling reporters, quote, I didn't say what that congresswoman said, didn't say it at all, she knows it. I had a very nice conversation with the woman, the wife, who sounded like a lovely woman. And to this, Wilson responded, I still stand by my account of the call between Donald Trump and Maisha Johnson. That is her name, Mr. Trump, not the woman or the wife. I don't know. I will pass the question off to you. What is your takeaway from this story? Just talking about all of this the past 2 days, it just feels like I'm wearing a dirty shirt I can't take off. And then let's talk about the insane fires in Portugal and Spain. In Portugal, everything north of the Tagus River was declared a state of emergency. That's about half of the country. Throughout the weekend and into Monday, there were 145 fires in Portugal alone. By Monday, 6,000 firefighters and 1,800 vehicles were deployed to the region to help combat the blazes. As of Monday night, dozens of those were still considered extremely serious. And from this, Portugal had over 63 people injured, 41 dead, although that number is expected to rise. Also, of those 63 injured, 16 are in very critical condition. Spain has also suffered tragic losses. 4 died in Spain so far, 2 of those found in a burned out vehicle on the side of the road. And as of right now, it's currently unknown exactly how many houses and buildings have been destroyed. Now, luckily, and it feels weird using that that in this story, but by Tuesday there was heavy rainfall that helped combat all the blazes. And this is incredibly lucky, not only because obviously this helps fight the fire, but reportedly this is the first significant rainfall in over 6 months for the region. This is actually the driest season in 87 years for Portugal. And on top of the extremely dry season, Hurricane Ophelia had strong winds that helped fan the blaze. These winds were reportedly so strong that they actually managed to send ash and smoke all the way to London. Additionally, the area is heavily forested with eucalyptus trees, which as it turns out have oils in them that cause them to be extremely flammable. Portugal's prime minister saying to the press, "This is a moment of mourning, of showing our condolences to the families of the victims." But for many people, that's not enough. Costa has been heavily criticized for his government's responses to wildfires. Back in June, Portugal had huge fires that left over 64 dead and more than 130 injured. And after Costa promised to enact policies to help combat and prevent fires, so many citizens are saying, where are they? Then today what we saw was Portugal's interior minister resigning, saying she was resigning to, quote, preserve her personal dignity, and saying that she had no, quote, political or personal conditions for her to continue. And many believe that her resignation is likely because of the fact that she has been blamed for the government's bad handling of fires and evacuations. Critics of hers pointing to her constant support of a system called SIRESP. And what that is a communication service in Portugal that's supposed to be used by emergency personnel. It's essentially a second phone service and infrastructure, but reportedly it has never worked in a big emergency. It's supposed to allow for easy, uninterrupted communications between emergency personnel during any emergency, also help them to evacuate inhabitants in danger zones quickly and effectively. But since 2010, the system has failed multiple times. More recently, we looked at those June fires, which left over 60 dead, but still the government refuses to cancel that contract. Meanwhile, in Spain, we're seeing a somewhat different situation. There, we're seeing government officials saying that they believe that these were acts of terrorism. Galician President Núñez Feijóo saying, "A day like yesterday is not the result of chance. These were terrorists who knew the adverse climate conditions." There are also reports that one man has been arrested for starting fires in Spain. However, that arrest was due to carelessness, not malicious intent. And so that's where we are right now. It is scary looking at that footage. My best wishes to those affected, and if there really is a better way to deal with what we're seeing here, I really do hope they implement it soon. And that's actually where I'm going to end today's show. And remember, if you like this video, you like what I try and do on this channel, hit that like button. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. Also, if you missed yesterday's Philip DeFranco show, you want to catch up, click or tap right there to watch that. Or if you want to see the newest behind the scenes vlog, click or tap right there to watch that. But that said, of course, as always, my name's Philip DeFranco. You've just been filled in. I love yo faces, and I'll see you tomorrow.